The year was 1974, and the city of San Francisco was paralyzed by fear.
Police believe it was a .32 caliber automatic weapon, perhaps similar to this one that was used by the crazed killers who shot 5 people Monday night. The killings have spread a shockwave through San Francisco, and despite pleas from the mayor and police officials, many citizens are apparently thinking about, if not actually, arming themselves.
Over the course of 6 months, a mysterious and brutal wave of killings swept through the city, leaving 15 dead and 8 more gravely injured. The victims, chosen seemingly at random, were gunned down, hacked, or bludgeoned with unrelenting cruelty. These weren't ordinary murders. They were racial executions carried out by a shadowy group known as the Death Angels. This clandestine group, an extremist offshoot of the Nation of Islam, orchestrated a series of racially motivated murders that terrorized California, particularly San Francisco, during a period already fraught with social upheaval. The era was characterized by significant civil rights advancements, juxtaposed with deep-seated racial tensions. The civil rights movement sought to dismantle systemic racism and promote equality, leading to landmark achievements such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. However, these strides toward justice were met with fierce resistance, resulting in widespread unrest and the rise of various radical ideologies. Amid this charged atmosphere, the Nation of Islam (NOI) gained prominence. Founded in 1930 by Wallace D. Fard and later led by Elijah Muhammad, the NOI advocated for black empowerment, self-sufficiency, and separation from white society, which they viewed as inherently oppressive. While the NOI's message resonated with many African Americans seeking dignity and autonomy, it also attracted fringe elements that interpreted its teachings as a call to violent action. The Death Angels epitomized this dangerous distortion. Operating in secrecy, they believed that murdering white individuals would earn them wings in the afterlife, a perverse incentive system that encouraged acts of brutal violence. Their campaign of terror, particularly the infamous zebra murders in San Francisco, exploited existing societal fears and exacerbated racial divisions, casting a long shadow over the progress achieved by the broader civil rights movement. Origins of the Death Angels, rituals of blood. The Death Angels' origins are deeply entwined with the more radical interpretations of the Nation of Islam's teachings. While the NOI publicly condemned violence, its rhetoric about white oppression and black supremacy provided fertile ground for extremist offshoots. The Death Angels took these doctrines to a horrifying extreme, developing a belief system that glorified the murder of white individuals as a path to spiritual ascension. Initiation into the Death Angels was both a psychological and physical ordeal designed to desensitize recruits to violence and bind them irrevocably to the cult. Prospective members were required to commit murders, with a macabre point system assigning different values to victims: men, women, and children. This system not only incentivized killing, but also fostered a gruesome competition among members, each striving to outdo the others in brutality to gain status within the group. The psychological manipulation involved in these rituals was profound. Recruits were often isolated from their previous lives and immersed in the cult's dogma, creating an echo chamber that reinforced their extremist beliefs. Covert gatherings, held in secret locations, provided a sense of belonging and purpose, fulfilling deep-seated needs for identity and community. This sense of camaraderie was weaponized by the cult's leaders, who used it to enforce loyalty and suppress dissent. Fear and indoctrination worked hand in hand to maintain control over members. The threat of violent retribution for disobedience, combined with the psychological conditioning of the initiation process, created an environment where questioning the cult's ideology was unthinkable. In this way, the Death Angels maintained their secrecy and operational security, allowing them to perpetrate their campaign of terror with impunity for an extended period. California's nightmare: murder across the state. The Death Angels' reign of terror was not confined to a single city, but spread across California, leaving a trail of fear and devastation in its wake. Their attacks were marked by a chilling randomness, with victims chosen simply for their race, making every white resident a potential target. One particularly harrowing incident occurred on October 20th, 1973, when Quita and Richard Haig, a young couple, were abducted while walking near their home in San Francisco. They were forced into a van, where Quita was brutally assaulted and decapitated, while Richard was left for dead after a savage beating. Miraculously, Richard survived, but the psychological scars of that night would haunt him forever.
This is the area where police found the young woman, laying in a pool of blood. They don't know much about the killing, except that sometime around 10 o'clock last night, the couple was walking down a street in the North Beach area, and they were abducted by 3 men at gunpoint, forced into a car and brought here. The woman's throat was cut. The man was hit several times over the head with what police describe as a large bladed object. He was left for dead, but he managed to walk back up to the roadway, where he flagged down a motorist who took him to the nearest police station. He remains in serious condition tonight at a local San Francisco hospital.
In another case, on December 20th, 1973, Art Agnos, a future mayor of San Francisco, was shot twice while attending a meeting in the Potrero Hill neighborhood. He survived the attack, but was left with lasting injuries, a stark reminder of the indiscriminate nature of the violence that plagued the city. These murders had a profound impact on local communities, shattering the sense of safety and trust that residents had once taken for granted. Neighborhoods were gripped by paranoia, with people afraid to venture out after dark or engage in their usual routines. The randomness of the attacks meant that anyone could be a victim, creating an atmosphere of pervasive fear. The media's coverage of the murders amplified this terror. Sensationalist headlines and graphic descriptions of the crimes dominated newspapers and television broadcasts, spreading fear beyond the immediate locales of the attacks. While the press played a crucial role in informing the public, the often lurid reporting also contributed to a climate of hysteria and racial tension. The Zebra murders, San Francisco under siege. The period between October 1973 and April 1974 became known as the Zebra murders, a reference to the special police radio frequency, Z, used during the investigation. During these months, San Francisco was gripped by a series of brutal, racially motivated attacks that left 15 people dead and several others wounded. The timeline of attacks was relentless. On November 25, 1973, Frances Rose, a 28-year-old woman, was fatally shot while walking home. Just days later, on December 11, 1974, Jane Holly was murdered in a laundromat as she loaded clothes into a dryer, shot in the back without warning. The police response was swift and overwhelming, but it revealed the stark challenges of confronting an elusive and seemingly random threat. The creation of the Zebra Task Force marked a turning point in the investigation, as officers worked tirelessly to connect the dots between the killings. Yet, this effort was not without controversy. Police instituted widespread stop-and-search tactics, targeting African American men between the ages of 20 and 30 who matched the vague descriptions of the suspects. Critics lambasted these measures as racial profiling, deepening the divide between law enforcement and the black community. The fear gripping San Francisco was palpable. Residents altered their routines, businesses closed earlier, and the once vibrant streets emptied at night. For many, the city seemed to transform overnight into a place of suspicion and dread. Newsstands displayed bold headlines warning of new attacks, fueling anxiety and speculation about the killer's next move. The randomness of the violence made it impossible to predict or prepare, further compounding the public's sense of helplessness. Behind the scenes, the police faced an uphill battle. Tips poured in from across the city, but many led nowhere. The suspect's ability to vanish into the fabric of urban life only added to the frustration. Even as sketches and composite drawings were circulated, the killers remained frustratingly elusive. Finally, a breakthrough came when an informant, Anthony Harris, stepped forward with a chilling revelation that would change the course of the investigation. A survivor's perspective, the Thomas Bates story, Thomas Bates's encounter with the Death Angels was as harrowing as it was miraculous. On a cold January night in 1974, Bates was hitchhiking near the Bay Bridge when a car slowed to pick him up. As the window rolled down, the passenger grinned and said, "Hello, devil." In the next instant, Bates was shot multiple times at point-blank range. Bleeding profusely, Bates staggered to a nearby motel, clutching his wounds. His ordeal did not end there. Every step was a battle against pain and disorientation. Motel employees were horrified by the sight of the bloodied man and immediately called for police and paramedics. Bates's survival defied all odds. Doctors later recounted how the bullets had narrowly missed vital organs, sparing his life but leaving him with injuries that would forever remind him of that night. In the aftermath, Bates provided investigators with crucial details about his attackers, though his physical and emotional recovery was long and arduous. For Bates, survival came at a cost. Nightmares and flashbacks haunted him, and he struggled with the trauma of being marked for death simply because of his race. Yet, his testimony became a critical piece of the puzzle, helping authorities build their case against the Death Angels. Betrayal from within. Anthony Harris's revelation. Anthony Harris, a Death Angels member, faced a moral dilemma that would ultimately shatter the cult's aura of invincibility. Disillusioned by the senseless violence and gripped by fear of being implicated, Harris approached the police with information that blew the investigation wide open. His decision was not without risk. By betraying the cult, Harris put himself and his family in grave danger. Harris recounted the cult's operations with chilling detail. He described the indoctrination process, the rituals, and the leaders who orchestrated the murders. He provided names, addresses, and key insights into the group's activities. His testimony painted a horrifying picture of a secretive and well-organized network operating with impunity. For investigators, protecting Harris became a delicate balancing act. His revelations were invaluable, but they came with the challenge of shielding him from retaliation while ensuring his information led to actionable results. Harris's cooperation led to a series of arrests, culminating in a dramatic raid that dismantled much of the Death Angels' infrastructure. The Miami Connection, the rise of Yahweh. Ben Yahweh. A decade after the Zebra murders, echoes of the Death Angels resurfaced in Miami, where Hulan Mitchell Jr., known as Yahweh Ben Yahweh, founded the Nation of Yahweh. Like the Death Angels, this cult operated under the guise of religious ideology while committing heinous crimes. The Sons of Yahweh, an inner circle within the cult, carried out what became known as the ear murders. Victims, predominantly homeless white individuals, were killed, and their ears were presented as trophies to Yahweh Ben Yahweh. One member, Robert Rozier, confessed to 4 murders, but later revealed involvement in at least 6 more during courtroom testimony. The cult's brutality shocked Miami residents and drew national attention. Rozier's detailed confessions exposed the depth of the group's depravity, including accounts of Yahweh Ben Yahweh rewarding killers with praise and privileges. One such reward, Rozier testified, was a day off to celebrate their success with a movie outing, a macabre juxtaposition of murder and normalcy. Courtroom drama and beyond, trials and testimonies. The trials of the Death Angels and their Miami counterparts were spectacles of horror and revelation. In San Francisco, survivors and victims' families took the stand, recounting their experiences in heart-wrenching detail. Prosecutors relied heavily on Robert Rozier's and Anthony Harris's testimonies, which laid bare the inner workings of these murderous organizations. In Miami, Yahweh Ben Yahweh faced a litany of charges, including conspiracy and murder. Despite Rozier's damning testimony, Yahweh was acquitted of murder in 1992, but convicted of conspiracy, receiving a 20-year sentence. The mixed verdicts underscored the challenges of prosecuting such cases, where secrecy and fear often silenced witnesses and obscured evidence. Unanswered questions. The Death Angels today. Decades later, questions about the Death Angels linger. Were all members truly accounted for, Or did some escape justice to continue their activities elsewhere? Did the cult inspire similar groups, perpetuating its ideology in new forms? The specter of the Death Angels serves as a reminder of how hate, left unchecked, can spread like a cancer through society. The story of the Death Angels is a sobering testament to the fragility of peace in the face of extremism. It highlights the need for vigilance against ideologies that dehumanize and divide. As society grapples with modern extremism, the lessons of the Death Angels remain chillingly relevant, a stark warning of what happens when hatred is allowed to fester and grow unchecked.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, share it, and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss an update. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.